Good morning, Kahal Kadosh. It's good to be back for the second class of today, Monday, the 13th of Tevet 5781, December 28th, 2020. Class of today dedicated for the Refuah Shelema of Farida Bat Mazal, Shimon ben Gladys, Jorge Gabriel ben Selma, and Ruth Silvia Bat Sara. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu send them Refuah Shelema among all of the Holim of Am Yisrael. Amen. Elna refanana lehem, Elna refanana lehem, Elna refanana lehem. Mechen yirason ben Omar. Amen. We continue with our weekly learning of the Pirke Abot. We come across Mishnah number 21 according to the textbook that I have, in the name of the famous Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, one of the greatest Hachamim of Yavne, the famous statement the Talmud says, Yavne v'Hachameha, and he was a direct descendant according to the biography of Ezra HaSofer, the great tzaddik that we mentioned him the other day on the 9th day of the tzaddik that we mentioned him the other day on the 9th day of Tevet, on Thursday, being the leader of Am Yisrael after the miracle of Purim, heading back to Eretz Israel. And the Mishnah brings certain statements about the message of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. So the Mishnah says, we're going to read the Mishnah, and then we need to open up this Mishnah to truly understand. Every sentence carries a beautiful message for day-to-day life. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Im en Torah, en derech eretz. If there is no Torah learning, there is no derech eretz. Derech eretz has a lot of different things. Number one could be the concept of work. Other explanation could be ethics. We can live with ethics. Im en derech eretz, en Torah. If there is no worldly occupation or ethics, there is no Torah. Im en chokhmah, en ir'ah. If there is no wisdom, there is no fear of God. Im en ir'ah, and if there is no fear of God, en chokhmah, there is no wisdom. Im en da'at, en bina. If there is no knowledge, there is no understanding. Im en bina, en da'at. And if there is no understanding, there is no knowledge. Im en kemach, en Torah. There is no flour, and flour here means parnasa, livelihood. En Torah, there is no Torah. Im en Torah, en kemach. And if there is no Torah, there is no livelihood. So the Mishnah talked about Torah, derech eretz, chokhmah, ir'ah, bina, da'at, Torah, and parnasa. These are the topics of today. Are we going to be able to cover all of them? I'm not sure, but at least we're going to make an effort to dwell, or to dive rather, into the Mishnah and to try to take practical lessons for life. So the Mishnah begins. Im en Torah. That's how the Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says. So he gives us the understanding that Torah is essential. And we mentioned this in the class of today at 9:15, how Yaakov Avinu, even prior to anything else, he sets up a yeshiva, a kollel in Egypt, because he understands the survival of the Jewish people can only be achieved through Torah, mitzvot, and connection with Hashem. So the Mishnah says, if a person doesn't learn Torah, en derech eretz. Derech eretz, although literally in English means worldly occupation, but derech eretz also means ethics. And Rabbeinu Obadiah of Aventura says, en masao umatano yafa ima beriot. A person cannot treat others properly without Torah learning. And you may ask, why? I'm a nice guy. I know how to treat people properly. The question is, what parameter are you, excuse me, are you using to treat people? Excuse me, are you using to treat people? Are you using your parameter? Are we using the parameter of the street, the parameter of the world, or the parameter of the Torah? If we really need to follow the parameter of the Torah, so in order for us to achieve that, we need to learn Torah. Very good. Bim en derecheres, en Torah. But even if the person learns Torah, but he doesn't practice it in the sense of he doesn't change who he is, so the Torah also will become secondary in the life of the person. And it says, Eno ba'al musar u midot tovot. It says very simple. A person, yes, has Torah, but Torah cannot be just for the intellect. Torah needs to be also for the spirit and for the behavior of the person, literally. And that's what it says in the footnote here. Mishe'eno ba'al midot tovot, a person that doesn't have a good character trait, ve'eno noheg yafeh ima beriot, and his conduct with people is not appropriate. The conduct that we're talking about is our interaction with people. How do we conduct ourselves with our fellow men? I apologize for the interruption. Okay. We may have an issue here from my end on the Wi-Fi. I think that we're back online. Excellent. So therefore it says, en Torah. En Torah means that the Torah really is not affecting the person in a positive way. And we have discussed this in the past. Part of the mission or part of our goal in our life is also to become better people, to become better Jewish people, to become better people connected to the Torah. Im en chokhmah, whoever doesn't have the wisdom to truly understand to the human limitation about the essence of God, the greatness of God, en ira'ah, he will never be able to develop fear of sin, of fear of God. Bim en ira'ah, and there is no fear of God, en chokhmah, wisdom doesn't stay with the person. Im en binah, en da'at, if the person doesn't have deeper understanding in the sense of learning, doesn't acquire knowledge, mimen da'at en binah, and even if he has knowledge, but if he doesn't have the understanding, so from the Mishnah seems to say that wisdom, knowledge, and understanding are paramount for the life of the person, intellectually and spiritually as well. And I think that to support this beautiful statement from the Mishnah is basically the Amidah. Ata honen le'adam da'at, behonenu meitecha chokhmah, bina, vada'at. We are praying every day, 3 times a day. God, grant us wisdom, knowledge, and understanding or comprehension. Im en kemah, en Torah, a person who doesn't have what to eat, how can the person be able to learn Torah with a certain peace of mind? Beim en Torah, en kemah. And then if a person doesn't learn Torah, what's the purpose of his life? And he explains simply because that the purpose of life, part of the purpose of life as Yehudim, besides all the physical and emotional aspect of family, it says very simple, that the DNA that unites us and keeps us alive generation after generation is specifically through the concept of Torah, learning. Okay? Let's see if we are able to be back. Beautiful. Loading. I apologize for that. Anyway, so I went quickly to this Mishnah, just at least to cover the basis. I like to do something different today. I like to quote, I put this Sefarim on the side, have a beautiful edition of the Pirke Abot, Rabbi Eliezer Papo. Everybody heard me quoting him many times. And I think that many people love his writings, the clarity and the eternal messages, like the Pirke Abot was written 2,000 years ago, and we still have what to learn and what to talk and what to apply in our life. The Pirke Abot and the Sefarim of many of the great Hachamim, despite the fact that they were written 200 years ago, the message is basically the same. So it says the following: Derech Eres, proper ethics, Rabu Se'ifav Upratav, unbelievable amount of chapters and messages related to it. Torah Derech Eres, excuse me, Arucha Me'eres Midah, as the Pasuk writes in Iyov, the topic of Derech Eretz, it's longer than the length of the planet Earth. The way we have a tractate, which I have it at home, it's called Masechet Derech Eretz, behavioral ethics, how to behave, how to conduct ourselves, how to speak to people, how to treat people, how to treat our parents, our spouses, our elders, our employees, our children, literally with Derech Eretz, the way it's written in the holy books, Reshit Chokhmah, Shene Luchot HaBerit, Shevet Musar, and it says, Mi haish hafetz hayim, a person who truly wants to live a meaningful way of life. Ilmad hipus, learn and research, lishmor et derech etz hayim, to connect yourself to the tree of life, as the Mishnah writes in Pirke Abot, but actually it's also mentioned in the Midrash Rabbah in Vayikra, Derech Eres Kadma La Torah, that Torah is powerful, but if the Torah is not supplemented with Derech Eres, that Torah becomes a Hilul Hashem, meaning to say that if a person that represents or supposed to represent Torah acts in a way that is not suitable and appropriate for that type of individual, that causes Haz v'Shalom a Hilul Hashem. And that's why the Gemara, he quotes the Midrash Rabbah, Beshaninu, Kol sheruach haberiyot nocha hemenu, ruach hamakom nocha hemenu. We quote the Pirke Abot back in the beginning of chapter 3, Mishnah 10. Very simple. If people like the person, that is an insinuation that God will like the person. Usually, people like people that treat people properly. If somebody mistreats you, are you going to be happy with that person? So the fact that a person mistreated any of us, Haz v'Shalom, it should never happen, but occasionally may happen, that creates an issue in the relationship with God for the person. So it says, so what is the bottom line of Derech Eretz? It says, Sheya'aseh hatov behayashar be'anei Elokim ve'adam. We got to do what's right. We got to do what's appropriate, not only in the eyes of Hashem, but in the eyes of the humans as well. Bibatel resono mipene reson acherim. Sometimes derecheres means to give in. Literally, be mevater. Put your wish on the side to honor someone else. It's not so easy. It's not so easy because some people don't like to give in. But it seems from this message between the Pirke Abot and the Pelei Yoes combination today, it seems to be that is part of our discipline. And it says, and even the person learns, Elu devarim she'en lahem shi'ur. There is no end to the topic of derech eretz, meaning to say, you cannot say, I used to have derech eretz 6 months ago. Now I decided no more derech eretz. What is this? Eating kasher and not eating kasher, says the Pelei Yoes. God forbid. This is a way of life, meaning to say that every day the topic of derech eretz must be reinforced in our behavior. If it's in the office, if it's with the workers, if it's with the knis, whatever it may be. Hakol lefi hamakom ulfi hazeman ulfi mashehu ha'adam. It says, and there is no clear cut, oh, you're allowed to say this, but I'm not allowed to say it, or she's not allowed to say it. It says, obviously, there are higher expectations from someone that learns Torah, somebody that prays with the minyan, somebody who has a daily schedule of learning, somebody who comes to the synagogue on a regular basis. The expectations of a proper behavior and derech eretz, it's a given compared to someone who barely comes to shul or doesn't pray at all, Haz v'shalom, or doesn't come to the shul to pray. Ule'olam, it says always be on the positive side, always respect people, and always know where to draw the line. Here he's talking about, in part, the concept of guest. That a guest also should know where to draw the line, how long he stays in someone's home, etc. We're not even talking about sleeping overnight, that's a whole different topic, but even as a guest coming to someone's home. And that's what he brings. Then he speaks about the rabbis. He says the rabbis that give speeches. Okay, now I feel directly affected by what he's going to say. So it says, Serichim leizaher shelo liot ma'arich tarha. It says also the speakers need to know where to draw the line. Obviously, our daily class that is broadcasted live via iTorah.com, or when we have a special shi'ur, for example, and they tell us, Rabbi, 45 minutes to an hour. Okay, we understand that's the schedule. But for example, let's say in the synagogue Shabbat morning, for example, or Shabbat afternoon, Sauda Shelishit time. And you know that sometimes many aliyot, many sebet of farah, etc. And maybe things become a bit heavy at the synagogue. And that's exactly what he's referring to. And it says, Tov me'at, betov emor lo kama kasran huze, misheyomru kama arkan huze. It is better that the rabbi is complimented by saying, I love your speech, Rabbi, straight, short to the point, that saying a complaint, why did the rabbi spoke so long? Did he forget to look at the clock? Doesn't he see that we are here for the past 2 hours or 2.5 hours? I'm adding my 2 cents in the drama of such a statement, but that's basically what he's saying. Be'ata, itzera kitzur bechol davar, bayomer lakoserim, Hashem imachem. And he brings a joke from a pasuk of Megillat Ruth. This pasuk literally means, Bayomer, Boaz, says la kotzerim. Kotzerim means the men that work in the field, those that were harvesting. May God be with you. And we discussed this a while back, why Boaz utilized God's name to say hello to the farmers. Short answer, to remind them that God is with them, especially when they work in the fields. But from here, the Pelei Yoes says Bayomer lakotzerim, and we say to the rabbis that give short speeches, especially when people are looking to go, etc., Hashem imachem, may God be with you, is a blessing to the rabbi. And I clarify, because we may have people from the committee or other rabbis or friends or even family members. We're not changing the length of the shiurim that we have established, like I said before, 40 minutes to an hour, more or less, give or take. But I think that he's referring to, let's say, Sa'udah Shelishit time, or Shabbat morning, after a lengthy prayer and a dozen people went up to the sefer, and people would like to go home. The rabbi needs to use a shortcut and give a Devar Torah, short, to the point, even a message, because it is better that the rabbi is complimented in this way than the rabbi is criticized. You know what's the dangers of the rabbi being criticized? Because one criticism against the rabbi can throw away 100 speeches that the rabbi gave. That's what's written in some of the holy books. An additional concept, asking someone a favor. Don't abuse the system. That's also part of the recheres, says the Pirke Abot. Don't make it a burdensome situation. Can I borrow this? Can I have this? Do you have an extra of these? Again, he's not saying that a person should not ask for help occasionally when you need it, but it's going to become like a habit. Every other day you ask from your neighbor something, it comes to a point sheyachbid alav, that becomes burdensome, and instead of doing the mitzvah in the proper way, now there is some type of grudge being held, God forbid, against the person. Now, also, don't push of asking things from people, meaning to say, if you went to someone and this person told you no, and you come back again and you ask again, and the person tells you no, and then the person finally gives in, maybe in your eyes it seems like he did a chesed to you, but now according to the Pirke Abot, serech gezel, it's almost stealing from the person. And these are heavy words. Why stealing? Because you forced the person to give it to you, like a thief or robber that forces you to give it. No, but he gave it, didn't put a gun on his head. You don't have to put a physical gun on the person's head. It's just a matter of asking and asking and asking and asking. Finally, like a child goes to the mother and he says, can I have this? No. Can I have this? No. Can I have this? No. By the fourth time, the child drove the mother crazy. The mother says, okay, go ahead. Why did she say yes? Or why the father says yes? Because he's tired and annoyed of being told by the child. So the Pirke Abot continues and it says that, needless to say, that every generation and every particular situation carry its own merit. But one thing is for sure, that throughout history, we have seen different messages of proper ethical behavior. And not all the time ethical behavior has to do with money or with marriage. For example, remember back in Sefer Bereshit, we discussed, and I even mentioned it on Friday, when we were discussing the changes of the translation of the Torah into Greek, and the Torah says, let us make man in our form, in our image, and they switch it to, let me make men, and Rashi says, why the Torah uses as plural language? Let us make men. It says the Torah is teaching us Hashem's humility, that he consulted with the Malachim. Same thing with Bezalel and Moshe and God. He consulted with each other and the Jewish people as well. Now you may say, what the recheres is to be humble? Of course, humility is part of the recheres. Because humility, my humility, your humility, anybody's humility has a direct effect on another person. For example, if a person handles well the topic of humility, guess what? a person will not get offended. A person will not get upset easily. But if, God forbid, the person has a certain level of haughtiness, so that will create anger. And once anger becomes activated, forget about the recheres. Pele Yoez does a great job, and that's why it says, "Berahamim lemib'eh min kadam mare shemaya," and it says, "Do me a favor," says the Pele Yoez, "dedicate part of your prayer for heavenly mercy and compassion." What prayer is this? He says, "Sheyetakenehu be'etzah tova." God bless me to have positive thoughts in my mind, la'asot hatov ve'hayashar, to do not only what's good, what is appropriate in the eyes of the Almighty and in the eyes of mankind. And that's what David HaMelech requested. Umsahem besechel tov be'enei Elokim be'adam. David HaMelech wasn't happy to be liked by God only. David HaMelech wanted to have both, which is our goal also, to be proper in the eyes of the Almighty and to be proper in the eyes of humans. Be'Hashem lo imna tov lo olechim betamim. And God will never prevent the goodness for those who want to walk properly in the footsteps of the Torah. Hen bechavod iten Hashem. The Almighty will give grace or graciousness and honor as well. What a magnificent explanation of the great Pele Yoez on the topic of the recheres. And guess what? This is for the world. The recheres is not a man's topic or a lady's topics or the rabbi's topic. The recheres is for every citizen of the world. Because goyim also need to treat each other in a proper way, in a respectful way. And the better the behavior of the recheres is in the world, the more light comes into the world. And the more light comes into the world, the darkness disappears faster. Excuse me. Another concept, now this is coming from the great Me'am Lo'ez, Rabbi Yaakov Huli. In one of the statements of the Mishnah we mentioned, in En Da'at, En Bina, in there is no knowledge, there is no understanding. And it says, what is the purpose of knowledge? So it says knowledge is important to be able to make a difference between what's right and what's wrong, what's good and what's not good, what's permissible or what's forbidden, what is allowed and not allowed. And that is why in the Amidah, the first blessing we say, Ata honen le'adam da'at. And that's in Birkot HaShachar. Same thing. Hanoten l'sechvi bina le'abhin ben yom u'ben layla. That beracha, maybe in the rooster, but it also refers to the sechel, that a person will be able to differentiate between day and night. Day and night doesn't mean only day and night in the physical aspect. It means the positive and the negative. Ubina, and understanding means past the knowledge. Now I have the knowledge. Now I need to make a decision. And therefore, but if the person has no knowledge, how understanding ever will be able to be alive? Now, Bina, other explanation, understanding, it means Shikul Da'at. Shikul Da'at literally means a calculation of knowledge. In other words, now that I know this, I need to make a decision. Do I invest in Bitcoin? Or do I invest in real estate? Or I don't invest? Or only invest in Israel? I'm using an example where knowledge and understanding, they need to supplement each other. But this is For example, when it comes to finances, what about something more critical, like marriage? Okay, you have this family, or this situation, or this shidduch. What do? Do you say yes? Do you say no? Now you need to make a shikul da'at. Shikul da'at means a balancing of the mind to understand. And sometimes you will need to come to a ahlata. Ahlata means a determination. Are you going out with her? Are you going to go out with him? Are you going to invest? Or are you going to keep the money in the bank? All these decisions. Or for example, education to the children. Okay, the kids need to go to school. I want to send them to a Jewish school. So far, so good. The question is, which type of Jewish school? Observant, semi-observant, co-ed, separate boys and girls. All these questions require some level of understanding to be able to make the adequate decision for life. Then it says, Im en kemach en Torah. It says very simple. If you don't have a certain peace of mind financially, how can you learn Torah? Or how can you teach Torah? I remember as a child when Argentina, as always, going through many type of financial crisis and inflation and a lot of things that, made situations difficult. I remember the one rule was enacted by the Hachamim that the community, the way the system used to be back then, I'm not sure if today is the same. I left Argentina over maybe 35 to 40 years ago, 35 I think, and change. And the announcement was made that based on the guidance of the Hachamim, the first one to get paid from the community will be the teachers of the schools. That was the ruling made. First pays the teachers, and then everyone else. And one fellow explained the reason why, using from the committee, using this Mishnah. It says, we are giving our children our biggest assets, our most desired treasure, to learn. If it's secular studies, if it's Torah, whatever, to learn. And if the teacher doesn't have a peace of mind, how can the teacher teach to our children? So therefore, they made this rule, that the teachers are the first one to get paid. And the Hachamim understood. But let's transfer this case now to our personal life as individuals. Forget about Argentina, forget about inflation, forget about government, forget about the black market, blue market, red market, or yellow market. Let's talk about bottom line. So it says, if a person doesn't learn Torah, what is he doing with his life? To get married and to have children? To go and do the same thing. So the Mishnah is trying to tell us is that part of our life as Yehudim requires an aspect of spirituality. And spirituality is not limited to charity, to kindness, or to prayer. It actually the food for the neshama, which is the concept of Torah learning. And then it repeats and it says, if the person doesn't have the idea of the Torah, so what's the essence of life without Torah? And I think that with that being said, this Mishnah was straight to the point, and it brings one more mashal, and it says, the life of a Jew, it's like a fish in the water. As long as the fish is inside the water, the fish is alive. But once you take the fish out of the water, the fish doesn't live. Hamavdil, he says, so is the life of a Yehudi. The Torah is represented by the water. As the Pasuk writes in the Navi, Hoi kol sameh lechu lamayim. Let the thirsty go drink water. Do I need a verse to tell me go drink water if I'm thirsty? I'm thirsty, I have the water here in front of me. I don't have a Pasuk to tell me. But obviously the message of the Torah is The water is the Torah. And we are like the fish. As long as we are inside of the Torah, meaning to say, we eat like that, meaning to say, we live by the Torah. We act like the Torah expects us from acting. If we conduct ourselves, if it's in the street, if it's in the world of business, if it's at the synagogue, if it's at our homes, we always have this digital GPS spiritual compass known as the Torah. So guess what? We are alive. But what happens if we separate the Torah from our life? It's like you take the fish out of the water. The fish doesn't make it. That's what brings, regretfully, assimilation and spiritual holocaust. And this is a very powerful message. And it says that it could be that sometimes maybe the learning is not strong. But as long as the learning is there, it's fine. But if God forbid there is no learning, how are we going to be able to maintain ourselves, to be good parents, to be good husbands, to be good mothers, to be good students, to be good children? How do we invest for the future? So when we invest in ourselves, automatically we are investing for our children and the future generations to come. My dear friends, I'd like to wish everybody to have a beautiful day. Shavua Tov u'mevorach. Ani ratzon that the words of Torah bring refuah shelema to all the names that we mentioned. And Be'ezat Hashem will resume the live class tomorrow, 9:15 via itorah.com. And being Tuesday, also we'll have the Spanish class at around 10:30 tomorrow morning. Have a great day, everybody. Shavua Tov u'mevorach.